Hello there, this is Paula Robin and Susie Anderson, and we are life coaches, and we have been having these deep dive mastermind conversations for many years now, and we thought that they might help and serve humanity, and so we are inviting you to join in this conversation or to listen in on this conversation and see if it might help you or someone you know to take a step forward, make some new focuses in your life, and to progress. So, in the past, we talked a little bit about systems breaking down, and it's 2021 today, and we are in the middle of a pandemic, and hopefully at the end of a pandemic is what I would like to say. And there's been a lot of changes and realizations and movement, and just a very different life than I think any of us expected or imagined. And so, with those systems breaking down, Susie and I wanted to visit about power and our head and our heart and the role that those play in there. So, don't you have a story you wanted to share with us, Susie?
Yeah, it actually showed up this morning before our talk. I had to go to the drugstore and get my medication, and there's always the question of which row do you go down according to what arrow. And I picked the pet food aisle because that's usually the least busy. And there was a gentleman, and I've seen him before. He works there, and he has a disability. He has some trouble walking and with his balance. And today it was really intriguing to me. He had two grocery carts, one with his cleaning supplies and one full of boxes that it was his job to pick up after they stocked in the morning. And at first I thought I was in a hurry and I was going to double back, go down another row. And I thought, no, this is ridiculous. Just wait. And so I walked behind this gentleman. He didn't know I was there for a long time. He was focusing on what his job was. And I started to watch some details that both carts were helping him keep his balance. And he could do it with one, but two made it easier. It gave him more power to do his job and to stay standing. And then he turned around and sensed I was there and saw me. And I think he was debating in his mind, oh, I need to let her by because of social distance. I wasn't going to pass him. And I think I would have scared him and he might have fallen. So I just waited in the pet food hanging out. He saw me and he smiled and he put one cart to the side and he shoved the box cart out into the open area so I could pass him. And we just exchanged smiles. And I really thought about what power does this gentleman have within himself and without of himself to help him do what he wants to do. And he obviously has a lot of self discipline and belief in himself that he could even accept this job given his limitations physically. He's been there a long time. I've seen him multiple times. But he also had the guts and courage to use outside of himself assistance in the shape of the shopping carts. And he was aware for a while only of his job, focused in. But as soon as he became aware of me, he switched immediately gears so that I could do what I needed to do. And I think that's where a lot of power comes is we need some personal inner power and we need some power from the outside environment. And then there's group power, which is even more massive. So that kind of got me thinking about our topic today. And I don't know what to think about that.
Well, thank you for the story, and yeah, very interesting that he was comfortable enough to be vulnerable to say, I need both of these carts. I need the support. This is just who I am. And I can still do this work. Whereas some of us might be afraid to say, oh, I don't want anybody to know, or I don't want to admit that I need some help in order to accomplish something. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about with power is that You know, in the past, we talked about these big systems of the government or education, medical, that there were large, or not large, but there were smaller groups at the top of each of those that were have been making all the rules for all of us. And we talked about how some of those might be old mindsets, they might be old setups, and maybe some of those need to change. And maybe they need to change on a really big scale, not just a little scale. Because I think that there was the, call it a misconception, that the power at the top guided everybody below. And so, what if we took that power at the top and we put it from the bottom up and included more people? What if, like, just like you and the man in the aisle, now both of you have a say so, you're collaborating and working together about the power structure. He's saying, I have a job I need to get done. And you're saying, I have a job I need to get done. So, how do we work together to allow each of us to succeed? Whereas currently the way we're set up is we're told, okay, here's the guidelines, and plug in these particular places, and if it doesn't work for you, then sorry, we can't support you. And I get that was understood to be a great structure for us once upon a time, but it isn't anymore because things changed.
Yeah, I think you're right on a lot of counts. I think a good example is the schools, where for years the school board, the school superintendent, teachers union, a lot of decisions were left up to them.
Up here.
And people had a little bit of input, and in some schools it's better than others. But now, because of the pandemic and the dramatic changes it's put upon this system of ours, now the kids themselves, the parents, are starting to request more power back because they have such individual situations that the one cookie cutter approach is not working anymore for them. I think, for instance, I have friends of people with special needs in their homes, and some have been permitted or able to go back, and others, because of their needs, can't keep masks on, which then causes issues for other students. And they don't understand fully why they need to wear masks. And yet they have a difficult time doing the online option that's given to them if they can't come in person. And a lot of people are saying, no, wait a minute, can't we figure out a different way of this or that, and otherwise don't talk to us? And in the two counties that are closest to me, they've had protests frequently of families, neighbors, teachers, and they all have a different part of the whole. They're all stakeholders in this big system we call education. And the power principle is really being examined, tested, in some cases restructured, and others, tradition is hanging on as tightly as possible. And some, the political leaders, are making changes to either let people in or send them home. And I think it's a in-your-face kind of power share that is showing this up big time in society right now. And it's kind of a mess in some ways. Some communities have done well, others not so much. What do you think?
And think, if you think about, if you're the superintendent of a school, which is a large system, and or if you're the principal or you're the administrators for that school district, and now nothing's working, that's probably a lonely place. It's probably an exhausting place to be. So what if they were to reach out to the children, the parents, and say, what do you suggest? We need some answers. And you're the ones that are, the children are the ones receiving the education. Their parents are the ones monitoring that, we hope. Um, it's a good idea for parents to be engaged with their children and with the school systems, the education systems, whatever those are, and to have a voice. And I know, I can't even recall where this came from, but I heard a story of a large corporation had a board of directors. And on the board of directors, they had lawyers and they had educated academia people and business people on their board. And someone said, okay, we're serving this particular community, and if it were children, let's add some of those children to our board so that they have a voice of what we're actually building. Because that board is directing certain things for whatever that business is. So wouldn't that make sense if you, like the school boards, if children were included and their parents were included instead of just those people that ran for office? And I think the reason we limit some of those people in these top tier meetings is because you need them to run smoothly, to be on a short time frame, to accomplish a good number of things. I know that some of the school boards do have meetings for the parents and then take that, but we interpret things differently. So, you tell me something, I go tell the board something, maybe I'm relaying it differently than you wanted it to be relayed. So is your power lost? So just an idea of expanding the inclusion of grassroots, people on the ground or people engaged on whatever the leaders are trying to accomplish. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I worked in the field of disabilities for years, and that was one of the changes that came into effect that made a huge impact, where they invited some of the people we were serving to be on the boards. And they often would bring up points that no one else had even considered because they weren't living their life.
Yeah.
They were guessing. And it changed a lot of people's ideas about what are we doing anyway? Who are we serving? And why are we doing it this way if it doesn't work for them? And it wasn't always easy, and they didn't take all the suggestions, but their voices were heard, and some of them they changed policies because of their ideas and their expression of, hey, I don't like it this way. It doesn't work for me this way. I know you guys can do something better. I don't know the whole system, but this isn't okay with me. And they had one of their titles was People First. And I thought, yes, people instead of programs. What a novel concept sometimes in some of these big groups. And some people felt very threatened because they were allowed to express and permitted and invited to share power with those who were used to keeping a small power circle.
Oh.
And it was very enlightening for me to watch, because I was a caseworker and I kind of was between the two systems. And I was one of the people that liked to do what they wanted to do and not necessarily what had been done. And that wasn't always taken too kindly, but sometimes it was embraced. For example, a lot of these folks that we were serving hadn't done a lot of things that you and I do every day without thinking. Some had never been camping. Some had never been allowed to bake anything in the kitchen. Some weren't allowed to pick colors or clothing. They were just given it. And to me, it was wonderful to watch them be given some power back and them to take some power back, to make life choices that they were totally capable of making, sometimes with a little help and coaching, but there was no reason to shut them down because it was easier for other people, but not for them.
Well, that's awesome to hear, that they were included at the boardroom and they were included in the daily life and the skills that they can grow and expand into. So I have a question. Do you think that we have many leaders I mean, there's people that lead in all sorts of ways, but do you think that there's an issue with some leaders thinking that they're the only ones that have the answers, and their fear of letting go of control might cause issues because there's so many issues out there that need to be addressed that maybe they will be overwhelmed?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I don't know about you, but a lot of times when you bring up just the word power itself, it has a negative connotation because so often it has been misunderstood, misapplied, misdirected. And I think that's part of what you're talking about is, does a position bring power or does the person have the power within, or both? And when people are invited to share power or change the structure of how power is used, it can be quite threatening for some people and quite empowering for others. And I know even some people, kind of the joke is if you wear a power suit as a woman, it's red. Oftentimes, if you want to really pop and be out there. Otherwise, some are told just wear black or brown or gray. And it's kind of an interesting visual way of thinking about power. Are we all technicolor or are we all black and white in how we use our power or understand our power? I prefer the technicolor myself, but it's going to take some education, some experimenting, some permission of power being shifted a bit. I think of children. A lot of times they're pretty much powerless in a lot of things that affect them.
Yeah.
And yet we've seen during the pandemic them take some power back and be allowed by parents, sometimes teachers and administrators, to do that. And they've done wonderful service projects by taking their power on and people letting them do it. And the wonderful things that have changed and happened lightning fast. Bureaucracy hasn't even come up in their conversations that here's something we can do. Here's the way I think we could do it. Mom and Dad, can you help me do it? And voila, we have meals for people. We have protective clothing, masks for people. Those kids took their power and ran with it.
And that's interesting, because children probably don't have all the obstacles that we have as adults. And one interesting way to think about it is a power station. If a power station keeps all of its power in its one little box, then it just keeps that part lit up. But if it can allow it to flow out to those who need it, then it's shared power. And so as life coaches, we help people that maybe are going through those tough times and up against those obstacles of, oh, now I have to share power. I'm so stressed out. I don't know how to handle this differently. I'm not sure how to move forward on this because I'm frozen. It's not what I'm used to. It's not what I'm comfortable with. What else can I do? Well, there's certain things within ourselves and our own that are blocking our own personal power that we have to work on to change and open up the flow to allow that share. And that affects us with our relationships with others. If you're a leader and you need to contain everything and control, you're blocking yourself and everybody that you could be integrating with and interacting with to allow your flow. And so expanding what's capable with you with relationships is huge. All of that affects your health. It affects you to some extent. Yeah. It's affecting other things in your life as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, because a lot of us have shifted how we deal with medical power. A lot of people have taken more power on themselves to make themselves healthy during this time, where they weren't doing it as much before. And isn't that fascinating that people have gotten in shape, lost weight, changed how they eat? They decided to, they empowered themselves. Pandemic was just kind of a starter. And I think what you're saying earlier about the shared power empowerment box, think of all the devices that we have, and people plug them in and charge them up, and then they can go for a while. And I think that's a lot with power as individuals and as group. There's a socket where everybody can plug in their things and then take it out and do it to get done what they need to do with their own devices. But everybody has to come back to that power source to get some more. And how is it that we think, or should we dictate who gets how much power, or just let it be free, like you said? And it also reminds me of electricity and the power, and they measure every month how much power we're using or consuming. And according to that, we pop out the money for it. And yet you have families with more children and more devices. You have people working from home. They need more power to do their work. And so they have to pay more for the power. And then we have the extreme where kids haven't been able to get on the internet. And the power company and the computer company and others have donated ways to get them more power so they can get their education. So there's a power sharing there that we probably hadn't thought of much at all until now, which is huge. We're sharing it more, like you said. We're permitting and allowing power shares.
Right, and so you're talking about sharing power, and what if we shared more power among all people? What would that look like? How would that be built? How would that structure be different? Is that, you've traveled to Africa? Is that something that you saw there more, or was it similar to what we experience in America of the leaders
very different
running everything?
Yeah, very different, because the resources they had weren't always used in the most effective, efficient manner. They're learning. And a lot of them, like in isolated villages and small towns, some had no power, electric type power. Some had no water power. They had to go walk and get it. And then others had been on their own or given help to, for instance, pedal bikes to generate power. And little power sources that you and I don't even think about, because we just turn on a switch and voila. It's not that simple for most of them, and it's too costly, but people have come together and shared ideas, which are power. And they've literally helped them come up with power sources that up until recently they didn't have. Because I saw people pedaling bikes and it was generating enough light for the kids to study, or to cook, and to do different things. So you go from rudimentary beginning kind of power options physically, and then you go to the deeper emotional power sharing. and the difference it makes in people's lives to have even a little power, whether it's a light bulb or believing that they can do something, they're empowered. Huge difference.
Yeah, that's absolutely huge. I grew up in a family that we felt like we had no power. Both of my parents had PTSD, one from the military and his parents, maybe family life, and one from just life circumstances at young ages. And when you have PTSD and trauma, you're locked up. And a lot of times you can't take care of things outside of yourself and you're just barely surviving within yourself. It's all about survival only. A lot of times things outside of you will trigger things within you that block your power. And so with two parents that had PTSD, the children, us growing up, we were raising ourselves. We didn't feel like we had power. We struggled with school and connections and relationships and money and a large amount of things. We did have a home, and I was always grateful for that. And to be able to find the things I could be happy about was a huge key. So slowly but surely through our lives, we've discovered how to gain power in different areas. And so power didn't always mean that I'm the controller or I'm the dictator, or I'm going to tell you how it's going to be and take you down. Power can be that I feel centered and calm within myself to handle everyday situations. And I can make money to support myself. And I can have great relationships. And I can love deeply and expand and share power. And to move from what I was talking about with the early on with my parents and family to who I am today is a gift everybody could have if they will take the chance to work on themselves. It's not always easy, but it's so beneficial. And so if we can consider that with the systems that are breaking down and leaders that are probably struggling within those systems because they're changing and must evolve, perhaps if we all just, do a little inkling of something, is find what you're grateful for today. Write down 5 things you're happy about and focus on those. Because when we get into the tough situations we have trouble dealing with, we might need some help. And then if we can change our focus and change the channel or shift gears into something that's positive and joyful, can we all share and move together?
Very well put. And one of the things summing it up is power can be used responsibly, and it gives us authority to make decisions and choices. And understanding those two principles will help us determine, how do I get more of my own power, tap into it, and how do I work with others so we share the power to get things done, to make changes? Yeah. Because we must be responsible to empower ourselves, and it gives us authority to change ourselves, but we also have that responsibility and authority to be part of the whole, be part of the solution, and not just the problem. So yeah, being empowered, the lifelong task, it's an art, it's possible, even in one area, one victory at a time, but understanding power a little bit differently, that it's not always negative, it can be very positive. It's just how is it used or not used.
Exactly. Or maybe just unknown. So if you want to learn about how to tap into your power, or you need to change how your power has worked or not worked, you're ready to turn on your own light bulbs, then start exploring. What can I do to take a step forward to increase that ability and light up the world in a loving way? And so if this is of benefit to you or someone that you know and care about, please share this video. And please join us again as we continue to speak on just deep dive conversations of what America and humanity is dealing with. And if our conversations help you, we are really grateful for that. All right, until next time, thank you for coming.
Here.